Welcome to Beastars episode 4. Apparently people are very interested in the show because there's been a bunch of different subtitle releases for it. Most of them have been pretty bad, so I've just been waiting around for the official PAS release. They just dropped it last night at midnight, so I'm only getting around to doing this now. Sorry that it's late, but the show is pretty good, so let's hope this episode is as good as the last ones. And without further ado, let's get started. This is why PS takes so long with their subtitle releases, and they're not even taking that long because they were doing Carole and Tuesday last season, and they only took like 24 hours to turn that one around. But this time they seem to be going all out because this show is like, I guess, close to their hearts or whatever. That title subtitle with the colors and everything. This is why everybody likes PAS. Okay, continuing. This is like a thing that happens in theatrical productions all the time. And it's kind of the reason why they have multiple sets of actors practicing for the same role. It's usually because sickness or personal, previous engagements or injury, God forbid, happens. You have an understudy who's already studied the lines and practiced alongside the other actors already ready to go. So this tiger guy, Bill, is ready to go as soon as Lewis gets hit down. And we also saw that when he was sitting in his hospital bed, he sees other people standing around him kind of like making sure that he's okay as pity, when it's really more like they care for you. And this is one of the things that there are many characters. This is kind of a character trope of people who value power a lot, is they never want to be looked down on, but they don't realize that when someone's just coming to take care of them, it's not looking down on them, it's helping them. Like, they don't want to ever be helped because they see that as some kind of like sympathy type thing. And I feel like that's going to be part of Lewis's arc, is realizing that it's not always about people looking down on you when they're helping you out. It's also, they're trying to help you because they care for you. And acknowledging other people's feelings of care for you is an important part of growing up as a person. So I hope to see Lewis kind of work through that in the show. We saw last episode that he didn't even want to be prey. He wanted to be a predator because he feels like his power is limited, and he's praised in a way that he feels he doesn't deserve just because he is prey for the strength that he shows. Whereas someone like Legosi, who naturally is strong as a predator and who has power that other people are afraid of, he wants that kind of power. He wants power that inspires fear, not so much as power that inspires people to rally to his side, which is the kind of power I would think you would want as a person, because fear tends to isolate, and power that brings people together leaves you with lots of friends at the end of the day. So I don't know why he wants the isolation fear, but he feels like that's on a higher level than the power he has currently, and that's going to be part of his arc for sure. Yo, the camera movement in the show is kind of nuts. They chose to do it in CG specifically for this reason, so they have more like kind of an epic feel. They can move the camera around wherever they wanted. But just having it be in CG and having like the perspective shifts be perfectly done, and you see like the side of Legosi's face as he's like snarling, it just adds like an extra effect to things. And they've got the proportions of his head and everything just right so that he looks like visually consistent throughout his whole body, even though he's not a real person that exists or anything like that. It's just cool to see like all the amount of work that they put into the show, especially because it's so new, like the technology that they're using for this. It's not been done in any show before, and to do it with anthropomorphic characters and not have it look weird, I think is just a great accomplishment. I've been watching a lot of VFX videos, which is might be why I'm getting really nerdy about this, but if you consider that this entire anime is done completely in CG, you look at the night sky. What looks different about this night sky than every single CGI background that we've seen in every single show this season? And it's the lighting. That's the answer to that. The only difference that I can really think of is there's not really any different texture, but they seem to be doing like actual cloud simulation and using what's it called? Like a photon-based renderer, like Redshift or something, where they like bounce the light rays off of everything. Especially in Psychopaths, this was like the worst CGI background that I've seen in any show this season. The show is good, the backgrounds are terrible. It's just a flat, matte surface with no reflection, scattering, lighting, nothing. And it just looks so dull and so boring. I'm talking about one particular shot. The night shots are not that bad, but the day shots are so flat. But if you look at this particular still shot, you can see the moon has like an aura around it, and there's like light bouncing off of the top of the clouds. There's light bouncing off of the side of his face that's closest to the moon. And because they're not doing like anything crazy. There's no subsurface scattering in his skin or anything like that, but it's just enough to give like the aura of a real night sky without feeling just completely flat and kind of artificial. If you look at an anime like Granbelm, which we saw last season, they did a pretty good job of doing the night sky too, but they did it using 2D animation and just using lighting effects with like their coloring, and that was pretty good as well. But this is like next level for CG. Please, somebody pay attention to what this show is doing with CGI backgrounds, CGI vehicles, crowd shots, and everything. If this studio is not the go-to for anything involving CG going forward, I'll be severely disappointed. And it may be that they're so in demand, they're not able to get around to doing everyone else's work. I assume that's the case, especially since they've been, now contracted with Netflix to make their own show. Someone is paying attention. But I think that was partly because Land of the Lustrous is on Amazon Prime, so they kind of wanted their own show from the studio, especially because Land of the Lustrous was so popular. But that being said, someone should be paying attention to this, because look at this night sky, it's so great. Oh yikes. I thought it was meat, I thought it was gonna be meat, but he just has straight blood. He's a wolf. Wolves have like 10,000 times stronger nose than ours or something. So he could probably smell that from him walking in the room, which he did. He walked in the door and then Legosi immediately sniffed. This can't end well. Have I mentioned that it's still really cool that we get to see a theater production inside an anime? I can't even remember the last time that happened. I know there was an anime like a few seasons ago about a bunch of performing idol girls at a theater show, but that was professional, and this is at a high school. And when it's at a high school, it has a whole nother component of like student drama, people working together to do stuff they may not otherwise be doing just because they're required to participate or whatever. So it carries its own like connotations with it, and of course there's like the matter of prestige of like being recognized for your roles and things. And for some reason, this academy like really likes theater performances, so it means that it's just everyone who wants to like get higher up on the social ladder just gravitates toward it. And that's why you have Bill, who has a vial of rabbit blood in his pocket or whatever out here, and he's just trying to like amp it up to the next level. The way that it's portrayed makes it sound like he's taking steroids or something, but that's kind of weird because the blood just makes you more aggressive. I've never heard of anyone take steroids for a theater performance. Maybe you take Adderall or something to make sure you remember the lines, but I don't think Adderall is even good for that, so I can't think of any performance enhancing that you would need to do for a theater performance. Maybe if it was like a sporting event, you could take it and it'd be just like an unfair advantage over the herbivores who don't really have anything comparable. But I'm glad it's focused on theater and not sports, because there are too many sports anime this season that are actually good, and having to watch another one with animals this time would be not really the kind of change of pace we're looking for, but theater is just great. Ooh, the way that they did the Foley is great. It's just like really hushed, but it's still audible, which is kind of the way that it would be on the stage. Is people always think they're speaking quieter than they actually are. They don't really pay attention to the people around them. They end up overhearing you anyway, even if that wasn't your intention. That's always what ends up happening. So the people speaking in hushed tones in the audience, you have to realize that it's still a school auditorium. It's not like the Tokyo Dome or something where nobody has any idea what's going on. So it's in the small theater. Bill is right at the front of the stage saying his lines, and the audience is like basically just calling him out for not being Lewis, who's the person that they all came to see in the first place, and they're like, he sucks, he's horrible. And it's like they think that they can't hear if the person on stage can't hear, otherwise they wouldn't be saying those things, because no one's deliberately mean like that except very few people. They just think they're talking to the friend next to them. But it gets to Bill instantly, and we all know what he's going to do now that he's been provoked, right? Let's see. Yo, this is sick. He's sick. He just drops his sword, comes right out and punches him in the face. Oh my god. Legosi, you need to calm down. Like, he has so many repressed feelings just from not really acknowledging that side of him at all that really wants to like do that kind of violence. We've talked about this before. He's like a kind of playing against type repressed male stereotype. And he comes out and just punches Bill in the face. It's like, yeah, this is basically Fight Club on stage in front of your high school. Let's see what happens. Great work by the voice actor to not just make it seem violent, but also pained, because he's more in pain than he is angry. He's in pain because he doesn't want to admit to himself that he is a carnivore at all. That's part of his repression of his like base self, is that he doesn't want to admit that he's a carnivore. He thinks that kind of stuff is disgusting, and for a carnivore to just flaunt in his face that he has blood in his vial in his pocket, to him is disgusting. And he feels that he's been excluded from society to some degree because he is this large gray wolf, and other people just feel threatened in his presence, but through no fault of his. And then he just, all that repressed feeling of all these years bursts out in this anger, and he goes and beats up Bill on stage. This is not the way to work through your feelings, people. You gotta just acknowledge certain things and tell people yo, I'm not unfriendly. Go out of your way to make yourself more personable and things like that. This is not the way you work through those feelings. And there's the tragic flaw of his character, is that he doesn't want to be a predator, and Lewis doesn't want to be prey. In fact, they would probably do much better if they just exchanged bodies. Then Legosi could be his introverted, just want to stand in the corner self, and nobody would disturb him at all. And Lewis could be that dominating power that he wants to be, the power that inspires fear, that really he aspires towards. Whereas Legosi just wants to be someone who just is forgotten in the background. And by destiny, that's not what they ended up being. Now that he's being bled, he feels he deserves this pain. In a way, that's why he's acting out, is because he doesn't think of the root of hurting himself, which is what some people do. More often than not, people who are encouraged not to act out just explode in some manner or other, as Legosi has done in this episode. And it's really not because he wants to inflict pain on others, it's really because he wants to hurt himself. And what ends up happening is that gets delivered to him through the claws of Bill. Bill slashes him in the back, spills his blood, and of course, Legosi's yep, I deserve this. This is exactly what I deserve. So, let's continue. I knew he was going to pull something like this. He can't step out of the spotlight for more than 5 seconds. That's why he didn't tell anybody about his ankle, because they thought they would take that away from him. But now he's back, of course, and as expected, he's pulling something to put himself in the spotlight again. Lewis, you're kind of a predictable character, aren't you? I smell some of the homoeroticism again. This happened in the previous episode too, when he was feeling up Legosi's fangs and stuff. Clearly this guy has some kind of weird predator fetish, and every time the music softens down when they interact, I can't help but think that something's going on here. Whew. And that was Beastars episode 4. What an intense episode indeed. Okay. The last episode I thought was intense enough, with him basically admitting that he wants to be a predator, and Legosi being I don't really want to do any of this, and then him getting injured and him going to the hospital. I mean, the first play performance was dramatic enough, but of course the encore has to be even more dramatic, and that's what we got this episode. The carnivore getting promoted up to play the lead part of Adler, Legosi playing a villain part, where of course things go off the rails. They get into a weird fist fight on stage. I don't know what the audience thought of that. When someone starts bleeding on stage, and that didn't happen last night, you know that something's going wrong. So how do you react to that? Apparently they just waited with, bated breath until Lewis came back, and then they clapped. So anyway, what a dramatic episode, episode 4. What to think? Let's see. Lewis is a pretty complicated character. It seems like he wants to uphold the school's, morals and everything, but really he just wants to be in the spotlight, which we saw with him coming back. Is that to save Legosi, or is it more because he can't be away from the applause and the attention for that long? We don't really know. Legosi's kind of an introvert. He admitted himself that he doesn't want to be a predator, so he has the kind of I would say dysphoria with being what he is, but unfortunately that is what you are, so you have to kind of deal with it at some point. Bill is the opposite. He's completely comfortable with who he is. The only problem is he's kind of weird about it and carries around a vial of rabbit blood, which he did not end up drinking. So I think that needs to be mentioned, because I think that vial is going to come back to bite one of these two in the ass eventually. The other important part of this episode is that Legosi doesn't want to admit to his predator like feelings because he completely has removed himself from that role, which I specified in the beginning. Like, he's trying to play against type, but he can't deal with the fact that sometimes he has urges that he can't control, which is really the point of the show into some sense, because it started with him cutting the rabbit's arm in that first episode. So it started with violence, which he's repressed again, and now it's erupted again in episode 4. We'll see how it plays forward. Now, another reason that I liked theater inclusion in this show is that because the show itself is so character focused and so dramatic and so theatrical in the way that its characters interact, it kind of feels like an Arthur Miller play or something from the 50s or so, and it's just perfect that it's set inside this theatrical production, because it kind of adds another layer to things where it allows scenes like this to exist without just devolving into like a school drama fight in the courtyard or something, which is how this Bill versus Legosi fight would have ended up being if it wasn't on stage, which is obviously much more dramatic and much more theatrical and more pleasant for the viewer to see, rather than just two people beating each other up in the courtyard, which we've seen a million times before. To see something original like a wolf and a tiger fighting on stage of a play production in a school is just something completely different. So credit to the show for going out of its way to be innovative and creative in that sense. And we talked a little bit about the animation in the show. I don't want to go into it too much because I feel like the show deserves a lot of respect in other means, and I want to focus on that rather than just the visual aspect of it. But for sure, the visuals are a strong attraction to the show, so I like to point it out when I see something interesting. But that's it for episode 4 of Beastars. What an episode indeed. It's a great show. If you haven't been convinced yet, I feel like this episode will really push it over the top as to just how well written and three-dimensional the characters are. And it's just one of those shows that you have to see it to believe it. So if you've already been watching it, recommend somebody you know to watch it. If you haven't started watching it yet, please consider that, because it's a great show, even though it's a little bit hard to come by these days. Eventually it will be on Netflix, so you can watch it then. But thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next episode.